Hello, everybody. Welcome to Radicalized, where truth survives and we got your back. I'm Heidi Cuda. This is a show about disinformation, who's behind it, and what you need to know to help us fight it. And I'm here with three of my favoriteest people and true warriors in the disinformation wars and bringing the truth from the trenches. Jim Stewartson,
What is
High
up?
Fidelity, and Sean Connor. And since this is our maiden voyage, would you guys mind telling us a little bit about yourselves and what's on your mind? Jim.
Let's see. I've been building entertainment and different kinds of reality fun entertainment projects for 25 years. And it turned out when I started looking at QAnon that it was using a bunch of the stuff that I had helped invent back a long time ago. And that really pissed me off. And then the more I looked into it, the more I realized that actually, no, this is a global fascist takeover, and no one's really saying that. So I got I dusted off my Twitter account, which had 300 followers, and here I am 15 months later, and I have been yelling my ass off this entire time. So I'm going to keep doing that until I feel like my kids are going to grow up in a democracy.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you so much for the work you do. You and I did a pretty
You bet.
amazing piece in Byline Times, and that's how I got to know you. Turned out we're neighbors, and I have stayed very close, to this tribe, just so I can feel like we're doing something to battle it. And your threads are very important, your Twitter threads. High Fidelity.
High Fidelity. I am a solution architect for, well, global 100, global 500 companies. I make networks that span the globe. And when Kyle Rittenhouse shot two people, killed them, and shot a third and injured him, um, I wanted the Give, Send, Go fundraiser taken down. And when it was not taken down, I started tearing into the people behind the Kyle Rittenhouse fundraiser and found a global network, which I then mapped. And along that path, I met Jim Stewartson and some other people. And we have been systematically working to take down this network and put these people behind this global fascist takeover in prison.
That would be the goal. Thank you so much for that, High Fidelity. And Sean Connor.
Hey, that's me. Well, anyway. um, uh, so I have a small litigation support firm, and my exposure to disinformation came by way of discovery for various mass torts that I was working on. What that means is that I was reading and finding out about the innumerable ways that corporate America has manipulated all of us for the majority of our lives, right? To some extent or another, particularly in the healthcare sector. So I got very, very concerned when I was seeing the same tactics and tools that were implemented by the corporate America being implemented online to radicalize people for political motive. Not that it's any better or worse, but the same tools, techniques, tactics that I was reading about in Discovery going against the defendant, I was now seeing emerge online, sort of emerging out of the chans. Basically, the manipulation techniques, the targeting strategies, the astroturfing, the digital information manipulation was now occurring in mass and for a defined political outcome. So that scared the shit out of me. Naturally, when that happens, what do? You turn to Twitter for all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
As one does.
as one does. Well, that's where the battlefield was because that's where Trump was using the bullhorn. So that's kind of what drew us in. But so just so our viewers know, Sean put together a band of a merry band of shitposting hackers to start doing a lot of investigations for some of the work he was doing. And he may have a small litigation firm, but he's got a major artistic talent. And that opening intro that you just saw and the music you just heard is all Sean. So we're super excited to have put this this team together. And quite frankly, you guys are my favorite people in the war, because you're not only made of some serious tough stuff, going to places that I can't go to bring us the news, but you're also very kind, and I appreciate you guys. So yeah.
Hey, Heidi, real quick. I think we may have lost High Fidelity. High Fidelity, if you can hear me, I'm gonna kick you out and then you rejoin. Okay, bud?
He's
Yeah, this is
we didn't want him anyway.
this is DIY. Well, now
It's easy. It's easier with just three of us, honestly.
He is more like low fidelity. You know what I mean?
I mean, this is a game of Survivor, right?
he just
We're
got
close
kicked
to
off
the
island.
end. Yeah.
We can talk behind his back while he's not here, because
All right.
in the time I met his one of his 15, 16 accounts that always gets banned because he trolls hard.
Serious.
Why do I come back to trolling? What did I do?
So
We
I
voted,
was
You
voted
did
you off the
something.
island.
You managed to get kicked out of your own podcast.
I just
Wouldn't be the first time.
I mean, you've gotten kicked
I've been
off
kicked out of
Twitter
everything.
15 times, so might as well get
Hey,
kicked off your own
hey.
podcast.
How many people have been kicked off of Twitter by a Russian gangster?
true.
This guy.
Yeah,
Two thumbs, this
true.
guy.
Yeah, we'll have a nice episode on that, because that Russian gangster, in so doing, basically forced you to examine his network, and it's pretty unsavory, to say the least. But
Hit dog gonna holler.
so Jim has vouched for these guys, and that's how I became friends with them. But I actually saw High Fidelity reading my Twitter feed, and even though he had a really creepy avatar, it was always really smart comments. So then once Jim sort of co-signed, I reached out to him and found a natural born news producer. And so that is why I'm thrilled that you're part of this, because I think we live in a sea of 24/7 news shit. And it's very important not to lose sight of some of the big things that happen every week underneath all the look over here, look over there squirrels, and all the who can out, who can be more horrible than the next guy to make a headline. So, yeah, so that kind of is a nice little fresh intro on the crew here. Thank you, everybody. And I think we should just get right into why it matters. And if Sean, if you want to cue us up, that'd be awesome.
Here we go, guys. 1 second.
Oh my God, the most punk rock show ever. All right, so hi-fi, what matters? What matters this week?
What matters? All right. So last week, the two things we got to talk about that are really top of mind is Paul Gosar, Republican representative for Arizona. He posts the anime edit online of him killing AOC and attacking Joe Biden. And there's a couple reasons that's important. We'll go into them in just a second. But the other part of those headlines is Trump was defending the chant "Hang Mike Pence" by the January 6th insurrectionists. And these things are important because they're stochastic terrorism. They are pushing people towards violence. And specifically, the anime video that Gosar posted appeals to radicalization chambers such as 4chan's poll and Telegram young anime kids who are radicalized online.
Yeah, Gosar himself is quite the character, given that he's a seditionist and also is a partner of Nick Fuentes, who is an actual Nazi and is the head of the Groypers, who are, the group of angry white incel males that, started Gamergate and have built this entire, fascist insurgency, as Flynn called it. It's amazing that that guy, who I call Nazi Slender Man, because he looks just like fucking Slender Man.
I always thought he was a bobblehead. Like, you ever see his
Well,
head?
he's got some kind of neurological thing. I don't,
thing.
you know, I don't get
Are you
whatever.
sure?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but he does look like Nazi Slender Man, and he is partnered with an actual Nazi, and it's amazing that he walks the halls of Congress.
Well, you know, here's hoping he gets censured. Here's hoping he gets expelled shortly.
Put in prison for a really long time for endangering his colleagues and killing 6 cops.
Yeah,
That
and
too, you know.
I don't know. I almost think he should be charged with a murder.
Censure my ass. He was a conspiracy to commit murder. Absolutely.
He got Ashley Babbitt killed.
Fuck yeah, he did, and a bunch of cops.
Yeah. All right. So that was pretty heavy. The next thing is actually a lot more positive. Georgia flipped 41 seats blue, and the media has not talked about this at all. It's almost like we're getting targeted messaging through our media, maybe. But yeah, I mean, that's huge. And speaking of elections, the other thing I wanted to bring up is that Glenn Youngkin, who's the governor-elect of Virginia, his son got busted trying to vote 2 times.
What?
His son, his 17-year-old son, tried to vote twice illegally. So yes, Republicans, there is voter fraud, and you're doing it.
Don't know where your 17-year-old is. He's out trying to vote again.
So we're going to talk about cognitive warfare a little later, and so I'm just going to drop this in here. The only reason Glenn Youngkin is governor-elect of Virginia is because of cognitive warfare, because a psychological operation was dropped into Virginia right before the election that got a whole bunch of white moms in the suburbs and rural areas of Virginia all turned up about this boogeyman where all the dark people are going to take over their schools. So Glenn Youngkin has no business being there, and the tip of the spear in Virginia, guess who? Ivan Raiklin, who is Mike Flynn's fucking lawyer. So, moving on. I apologize.
No, that's all important stuff. And before you move on, I just have a couple of theories. I was working last year in homeless services, and there was a big explosion of social justice issues, and everything was at the forefront of diversity, inclusion. Every corporation, put out a memo as quickly as they could, hired diversity inclusion execs, and made it look like they cared about racial issues in America. And so what you just touched on, this whole backlash to that, I think is very inorganic. And B, I think you're exactly right. It's something that's been manipulated to scare people out of their entitlement to voting against their own best interest. Secondly, I really think that this crazy ass extreme right wing, what would have been fringe back in the day pre-Trump, I really think that in order for people to talk about these guys, they do the worst things possible. They have no shame, and they know they're going to make a headline with some of these horrible things. And not to throw you off, but I'm very upset by 2 things from last week. JD Vance's fake thread about his outrage over Rittenhouse. I see how you guys sometimes just want to punch somebody. I looked at him as like a nesting doll for Robert Mercer and Peter Thiel. But I also was very offended by Peter Thiel's COO of his foundation standing there with his gun video. This is not for duck hunting. I'm sure you guys see this shit all the time. I try not to see it, but I just thought to myself, who is this guy? Who's this guy trying to shoot? What is he trying to say?
Yeah, that was.
Look, I'm just going to say this once. Peter Thiel is a threat to democracy. He's a threat to humanity, and he needs to be stopped. Period.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Okay. Well, I just had to get that out because, again, this is a place where we can talk about this stuff. And if I keep it inside me,
Absolutely. You should. I agree. Let's put it. I agree.
if I keep it inside, I'll
Yeah.
get angry and I
You
won't
should
be able to
not.
take
No,
action.
we're here to vent for the
Let the
people.
poison out.
Right on.
We're
Poison
venting
out.
for the people.
Ranting
Okay.
for the people. All right.
Okay. High
Last
five.
story. Last story that really matters is Mark Meadows pulled a Steve Bannon, and we also got to saw how that turned out for Steve Bannon this week.
Well, not
Yeah.
yet.
What?
We'll see tomorrow.
Well, we will see on Monday. The other thing that's really big good news is Mike Flynn got a subpoena. Love that. And Jason Miller, the individual accused of dosing his mistress with an abortifacient to make her miscarry and then not paying child support, he is now running Getter. And Getter is based off of Guo Wengui's Chinese code base for social media. And if you also remember, Steve Bannon was arrested on Guo Wengui's yacht. So there's a lot of Guo Wengui behind the scenes here.
Well,
I
thank
don't
you.
know.
No doubt.
Thank you so much for that. Jim, do you have any final thoughts before we move on to
No, just
hellscape?
that. I mean, Bannon just goes around picking up billionaires and you know, he'll latch on to whichever one wants to move him as close as possible to his apocalypse. So
Yes. Thank you.
Guo is the perfect man for the job.
A friend of mine who used to work with him at Breitbart, who became quite the activist in the resistance, called him a parasite in search of a host. And I always thought that was such a great visual. So I've referred to him as Parasite Bannon. And quite frankly, sometimes you're just kind of like, shoot him into space, let him just go live in Belarus or whatever. No, he needs to be silenced. You guys know because you listen to what he says, how dangerous it is for him to continue to have a microphone. So let's hope
Well,
he does.
he's the one who looked at 8chan, looked at the misogyny and violence and mayhem and misery on 8chan and said,
Yeah, I can use
"That's
that.
awesome.
Mhm.
Let's
I can, yeah.
fucking cover that in Breitbart and blow it up as much as possible and put the most psychotic op we can think of, Milo fucking Yiannopoulos, on it to really get it going."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, imagine this, like looking at that crazy ass cult that was doxing people, getting people hurt and killed, and so many people traumatized, from getting trolled and just attacked.
Yep.
Imagine looking at that and go, fuck yeah, let's do
Yep.
more of that.
Those are the people that I want. Right.
Yeah.
That's the group of people that I want to represent.
To
Hey,
quote,
Hitler had the Hitler Youth.
yeah,
Bannon
right.
had 4chan and 8chan.
It's so terrifying. But to quote Mike Ness from Social Distortion, I think we're looking at a lot of sick boys.
Yeah.
And I'd like to stop them from proliferating. And I hope our show makes a dent in some way. Because, again, we don't see the same narrative in America anymore. And that's one of the through lines here. We're trying to get people an opportunity to see the same thing, which we used to do. We used to be able to see the same thing. So
to quote Fugazi, promises are shit.
okay, I love you guys. Okay, so oh my gosh. So in any case, thank you so much, High Fidelity. That was an incredible opening news block, and I am very appreciative of the work that goes into this. And now we're going to get on to Jim's hellscape. And before we move on, this is Sean's moment here.
Yeah, here we go.
It's my moment.
Jim Stewartson's hellscape. Oh fuck.
Okay, back to
Yeah, oh fuck is right.
Back to seriousness again. Oh man.
So guys, we have a guest here. So do you want to bring him in now?
Well, that's Jim's call? Do you want to bring Dave in for the hellscape, or do you want to? I figured we'd save our guests for after the
let's just
hellscape.
we'll go through. We'll do our little 10 minutes here, and
Yes.
then we'll get started.
Yes, so
Dave.
let Dave know, and we will be revealing which Dave we are all talking about after we get through the hellscape. He's Dave. Dave, we love Dave. Dave's important. I can't wait to do the Dave intro. So no, seriously though, you broke a lot of news this week, and there were some people that got very hurt. And who got hurt this week, Jim?
Well, the first person I wanted to talk about was 8-year-old. Do we have that video?
Let's see what our
Because we were talking about Hitler Youth before.
Yeah, right.
And we were talking about CRT.
Well, let's talk through it and then see if Sean busts out the video, because he might be talking to Dave at the moment.
Here we go.
Because it can make you sick. Because when you touch the mask to put it on you, your hands they can have hundreds of bacteria on your hands. Then when you take the filter and put it inside your mask, and then you also touch it. Then you put on your mask, and then you breathe in all those bacteria and get sick.
You just broke my heart.
So that child has been trained, obviously, in that little, insane story that, doesn't exist at all. That none of that was real or true. And it is really important that we understand that the reason why they go after the woke cult, and they use all those terms, and they're ginning up the CRT boogeyman, is because they need to project onto something what they are actually doing, and what they are actually doing is indoctrinating our children, both through their parents, through the schools, through disinformation online, through their friends, and it's really important that we understand that the damage that's being done is not just to grown-ups who are, getting brainwashed on Telegram. It's to kids who are really confused, who there was one last week where a kid came home and he was really mad at his mom because his mom was going to make him get a vaccine, and his mom was heartbroken because the trust between her and her son had been broken by a cult that made its way into a school through a history teacher. So, and that teacher is going to be disciplined according to the union's guidelines. We are just not coming to grips with the fact that this disinformation poison is affecting our kids as much as it is the adults.
And I'd like to point out, Jim, there is a historical basis for this. If you look at the rise of National Socialism and how Hitler and that whole movement was sold with propaganda, how youth were indoctrinated through the Hitler Youth, it is textbook. They're following the exact same playbook.
It is absolutely textbook. And there's
how do people not recognize this?
Well, they sort of do in bits and pieces, but it's hard for people to.
The more frightening thing to me is so what if they do recognize it?
Well, right.
Because you have the polarization is gotten so extreme that it's even creating a shared reality with which to construct a conversation is difficult.
It is. There are things that we can do, though.
That's true.
There are clear 100%. Things to do, right?
Yep. And I've been looking. Narrative theory has been really intriguing me lately. Where you ask someone their story, and so you sort of create a foundation there, and with the hopes of creating a narrative that can absorb their story and your story as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting, actually. Yeah, because and the point that stories are actually the way that we communicate. between us is
Totally.
really important.
Yep.
Like think about like you're 5 years old and you touch a stove and it's hot, right? How do you remember that? You remember a story. The story
That's right.
is I fucking touched the stove and it burnt me really bad. So not only do you get afraid of stoves, which is appropriate, but you get afraid of hot stuff in general, right?
Right.
Like
That's
that's
right.
that's how stories work. And those stories, if they're constructed like a virus, they're constructed badly, that same power can be used against you. And that's what's happening.
You're not talking about memetic warfare now, are you, Jim?
I am talking about
I mean, that's
precisely
what's so.
memetic warfare.
That's right.
So
And where did we learn
what's,
about memetic warfare? From the paper that Jeff Garcia wrote.
Yeah, for NATO in
For NATO.
2007 about literally
Stratcom. Yeah.
memetic warfare.
so
Memetic
you
Oh,
already
and Jeff
got
Gassea works for Peter Thiel.
my concern. Obviously, there's a million concerns about what you just brought us. Is in 2018, I did an investigative look on de-Trumpification and how do we de-Trumpify our country. And it became very clear to me that we've lost 30% and we just have lost them temporarily, and that's all we got. And it was so clear to me that we had to hold the line on the sane majority and keep them. They're getting picked off one at a time, whether it's the yoga mom, the wellness community, whatever it is, they're getting picked off. I anecdotally are losing people in my life that I never thought I would lose, whether it's the anti-vax, whatever the anti-fear that they're selling. And so obviously this is a great concern, and I'm glad you brought it up. And now I think that you also did a major thread on Flynn last week and multiple things from General Michael Flynn. One of them was his projection on Fox and Tucker Carlson, and there was some interesting threads you put out about his Q rhetoric. So let's just get right to one of the architects of this misery.
Yeah, the general. He's so I was saying before there are things that we can do, right? The first thing we can do is arrest Mike Flynn, because Mike Flynn is the guy who since 2015 has been waging cognitive war on the United States.
Yeah.
Military style psychological operations are part of that, and we'll get into that more. But now he's on Tucker. Apparently, he's going to be there on the time all the time, just straight up doing QAnon conspiracy theory shit. Hey, Sean, do we have that Tucker clip?
Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has been subpoenaed by the January 6th Commission. He joins us tonight. General, thanks so much for coming on. So what do you make of what's happening to Steve, since you're in a similar position, what do you make of what's happening to Steve Bannon tonight?
Well, I think it shows the speed in which the Democratic Party is moving to confirm their complete takeover of this country, Tucker. There's no other way to put it.
So Flynn, is in the process of trying to take over our country. He came in from the top with Trump, and now he's coming up from the bottom through school boards, through anti-vax, through Big Lie, through all that shit.
Yeah, right.
And so there is something to be done. And the point of that clip was just that, Mike Flynn is projecting. Mike Flynn is trying to take over the country. Almost every sentence that comes out of his mouth that accuses somebody of something is what he's doing himself, which is, straight up Joseph Goebbels from, the propaganda minister of the Nazis. That was rule number one: accuse the other of that which you are doing yourself.
Yeah, right. One thing I will say, and I'm sure Hi-Fi has some thoughts too, is that in the last 24, 48 hours, and maybe it's because Judd Apatow tweeted, some variation of "suck my balls, Flynn." He didn't exactly say that, but it was close. I feel like there's almost like all this work that you've been doing to expose Mike Flynn for the danger that he is. I feel like in the last maybe 24 hours ish, 36 hours ish, I've seen a lot more people, high profile, just basically saying, yeah, this guy's dangerous. And we weren't really hearing that. He was doing his little leadership conferences in the fringy, churchy areas, and you were documenting them.
People were managing to minimize those things, right?
Right.
And there's a concerted effort to minimize things around Flynn.
And he does play that aw shucks sort of card very well, I think.
He does. But there's also, whenever, and me particularly, when I put stuff out about Flynn, the stuff gets minimized. And, like when Flynn did a prayer to a Christian church, unbeknownst to them, of theosophy, which is absolutely heretical to everybody who was saying that prayer, got turned into a dumbass story about somehow QAnon supporters are calling Flynn satanic. That was just a disinformation, bomb. That was bad information being put on top of important stuff.
Wow.
And we need to. I think the thing with the one God, one religion thing is everybody basically, except for white male fascists who follow Mike Flynn, were like,
right.
Hold up.
Yes.
What the fuck are you talking about, bro? What do you mean one religion? Whose religion? Right.
Well, which Christianity, right?
And so, when I put out here's him doing doomsday cult ideology and enormous church, that was easier to debunk than Mike Flynn saying, yeah, we should have one country, one God, one religion, which, by the way, is precisely the KKK America First slogan from the 20s.
Wow.
One God, one religion.
Right.
Can we also point out that this is the viewpoint of Islamic extremists as well? I mean, theocratic fascism is theocratic fascism, regardless of the book that you have.
I fully agree. But right now, it's not the Islamic fascists I'm worried about.
No, it's
There's
the
plenty
Christian
of those
fascists right now. Those are, and they're not even really Christian. They're, what is this, theosophy?
Well, no, there's a lot of Christians who have been turned into the cult, right?
Yeah.
Like the cult.
Well, the Catholics, I guess.
Yeah,
there's the whole Opus Dei.
Every single denomination has been infiltrated by this cult. All of them.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for that fair warning and for bringing us that really serious news. And I'm glad to go back to what Hi-Fi brought us at the top. I am glad that he's being subpoenaed and that maybe his time on the propaganda network, will be cut short, but that we won't know that for a minute. Before we bring on our guest, did you want to discuss this NATO report that you dissected, or would you prefer to do that with Dave?
Yeah, actually, why don't we can talk about that with Dave. Dave knows something about this.
So just a brief
Dave
intro.
has lectured in PsyOps. So
Sweet.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm just going to do
Hey, guys.
Look at him. He looks like he's lecturing in PsyOps right now.
I look like Winnie the Pooh also, but that's another problem.
Let me just do a quick intro on Dave Troy, because I have something special to say about this disinformation expert and historian. I do investigative pieces for Byline Times in the UK. I was in the middle of doing a report with Dave Troy on some of the history and intersectionality of the extreme right-wing faction in America and where they intersect with Kremlin extremists. And it was like 2 a.m, and I got chilled to the frickin' bone because I knew how serious this was. And we talk about the weird intersection between the extreme right and some of the, foreign fuckery. But Dave really laid it out. And so I just wanted to make sure I introed you that way.
Heidi, I thought you just said you got chilled to the bone because you looked on Twitter and David scooped you.
Oh, that's true too, actually. That's true too. He actually wrote
He does it all the time.
Yeah, you know what? But I'm happy because this is all about putting out information and truth. And where I feel very safe with Dave Troy is that you bring us the history. And to me, that's very important because I become a lot less scared when I have a perspective and a framework for some of these characters. If some of this has been done before, 70 years ago, 50 years ago, I feel safer, like, okay, I've got a place where I can start from. So
I don't. And the reason is because when Dave goes back 50 to 70 years, he's going back to the same plot that we're in right now.
Yeah, right.
Like it's not
It can be a little frightening.
it's not history. It's like the same people doing the same shit.
Yeah, some of them aren't dead yet, That's
some
the other thing.
like Jack Singlaub, for God's sake.
He ain't dead.
He was in the OSS. He founded the CIA.
Can I just point out that in corporate America, crappy managers will take the same playbook and they'll just repeat it endlessly. And like when they move companies, they'll just run that same playbook at that new company. What we are experiencing is the same crappy fascist managers rerunning their playbook.
That's right. So part of the obviously my interest in all. Please go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that Steve Bannon was very explicit in saying that he thought that the 2020s was going to be just like the 1930s, and frankly, he's ripping a lot of the same plays right out of that decade, and so it's not surprising it's shaping up to feel a bit like that.
Yeah, all I was going to say was that, and you're exactly right. Hi-fi in the corporate sector, and some of the documents that I've read and been exposed to, a company or a consulting company or a third party will come up with a new strategy, technique, or approach, right? And then once that catches, it filters through the rest of the multinational corporations. So if there's a new way to sell something at a percentage point for a group purchasing organization to sell to 5,000 hospitals, well, the healthcare company will do it, and then the next one will, and then all like dominoes, they'll all fall down the line.
And on that happy note, I would love to, because there's a few things that we definitely want to get from Dave while we continue this, but I'd love Jim to queue up that NATO explainer that you did. And so,
first of all, let me just explain real briefly. Dave and I connected in August 2020. I think that's right.
That's right. Maybe July, August, somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah. No, I started August 2nd on this crazy ass thing. And I reached out to cult expert Stephen Hassan.
Yeah.
And who connected me with Dave, and Dave and I were in the darkest possible zones you can ever imagine for many months, trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. And we found out a lot. We got sent down some crazy ass pathways, but we did find out a lot, and I think it launched us into some very important directions. So I wanted to publicly thank Dave, who did a hell of a lot more than he ever wanted to take credit for.
Dave is a fantastic connector, isn't he? He put me in touch with an expert on basically Jack Dorsey. I was looking into Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey for a potential solar panel litigation case. And so Dave was nice enough to put me in touch with one of his associates in New York and really helped me sort of flush out that relationship.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, well,
none of us wanted to do this. Like we were saying, we all had hobbies in a life.
We've all been drafted.
We all had hobbies, yeah.
Unwillingly, but I think it's civic duty at this point. So I'm very grateful to all of you. And so there's a few things I want to talk about, and I want Dave to basically dumb down why crypto is such a danger. I'd also like him to talk about whatever is most urgent that he wants to get out, what he would like people to think about, or possibly action steps they can take. And then I think it's very important that we have that conversation on the cognitive thread that Jim did, so people can kind of understand. This is a show about disinformation, where we find it and how to fight it. And so the more information, the better scopes we have, the better, the merrier.
Cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and so I guess maybe to start on the crypto thing, it's sort of a complicated terrain, and that's part of why it makes it difficult to kind of, for people to get their heads around it. But just some, really basic background on kind of, monetary policy and, where our ideas about money come from. Just going back to, say, like the late 1800s in the United States, and I'm going to kind of limit my comments to United States for the moment. The gold standard had become kind of like a de facto, reality in America, from some of the earliest days throughout most of the 19th century. And by the time that the late 19th century came around, gold was, just sort of like what people had been using as, the basis for currency. So you could redeem, a dollar in exchange for gold, and, gold and dollars were sort of treated interchangeably based on a redemption formula. And so this created, a fairly, sound basis for money, but it also made it so that if we ever needed like a lot of money quickly, or there was anything weird going on in the economy, we didn't necessarily have kind of enough money, that could be backed up by gold to, sort of get the money where we needed it. So you ended up with these kind of liquidity crunches, and we're familiar today with liquidity crunches from, situations like 2008, where, their banks didn't want to lend money, which made it impossible for deals to go through. So
Right.
all kinds of secondary follow-on effects around money, became an issue. And so around the late 1890s, there was a push to adopt other metals, specifically silver, as the basis for currency. And so that was called bimetallism, and William Jennings Bryan was the primary advocate of bimetallism. And the idea was there'd just be more money and more kind of liquidity, so therefore farmers could get paid and we could deal with droughts and, shit that was going on in the country at a large scale. So that kind of made sense to people, but at the time, the gold standard was kind of considered, the most, honest form of sound money, and sort of favored by the industrialist class. And so they were successful in getting William McKinley, who was elected in 1896 as president, to pass the U.S. Gold Standard Act in 1900, which established the gold standard starting in 1900. And then when World War I came around, it was necessary to get off of the gold standard. And then we went back onto it for a little bit in the 20s. And then when the Depression happened in 1933, 32, Roosevelt came in, wanted to do the New Deal, and said, listen, here's the deal. We need a lot of money in order to fund all these New Deal programs, and we don't have enough gold reserves to back all the money that we need to do this. So we're just going to not, basically allow redemption of dollars for gold. And also, by the way, we're going to make it illegal for anybody but the U.S. government to hold physical gold in any kind of quantity. Mm-hmm. So that was done via an executive order. And in 1933, a bunch of industrialists decided that maybe what would be best is to have a raid on Washington, where they recruited a group of 500,000 veteran super soldiers from World War I, who were also, by the way, pissed about not getting their bonuses from World War I, because they weren't supposed to be paid until 1945, and they were concerned that by the time they were paid in 1945, they would be worthless because of concerns over inflation. Mm-hmm. So they recruited a general named Smedley Butler to lead this army of 500,000 super soldiers. And he was a very well-respected, decorated veteran, and, somebody that carried a lot of weight with the veteran community. And they asked him, would he lead this operation? And also, would he mind, giving speeches in favor of the gold standard at a bunch of different events and whatnot, specifically to like the American Legion and stuff like that. So he was like, okay, tell me more about your plan. It sounds kind of weird, but, tell me more. So he kind of led them along for a few months and eventually had enough information on them to kind of turn them in. So he reported them to Congress, and Congress was like, wait, what? We're just going to lead a group of super soldiers to overthrow Congress? And, this all sounds very familiar, doesn't it? It's basically the same plan, just recycled. So,
yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, exactly. So basically Congress held hearings. They determined that Smedley Butler was in fact telling the truth, and that in fact there was this plot that was put together by like J.P. Morgan and Dow Chemical and Remington Firearms and all these people from industrial world, Mellons and Scapes and that kind of group. And then they proceeded to release their findings, at which point the media discredited Butler and said that he was nuts and that he was senile. Of course, he was 52, so
Right.
it's really old. I think a couple of us are around that age.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's my age.
yeah, exactly. I'm a
can
little
say
younger
that.
than you, but still, I mean, we're obviously getting to that point where we can't be trusted. So, at any rate, the industrialists, they all owned these newspapers and the other media, and they didn't really report on it, and they just smeared Butler the way that we see people smeared today in disinformation campaigns around this kind of stuff. And the whole episode just kind of faded into American history. I had never heard of it myself until I kind of came across it this year. And then, I know enough other American history to kind of plug it into that framework and have a sense of what was going on. But essentially, that was, the first version of this, and it was all about the gold standard. So, when you look at the history of, say, like the Koch operation and their connections in with, that exact same group of industrialists and the gold standard and the I Am cult and all the things that we've been tracking, their whole thing, and in fact, the Kochs and Mercers and George Gilder and the Council for National Policy and all those people, Mark Skousen and Freedom Fest, they're all obsessed with the gold standard. So, how does the gold standard translate into today? Like, how is that being pushed forward? Well, in 1997, a guy named James Dale Davidson and William Rees-Mogg, and if Rees-Mogg sounds familiar, it's because William Rees-Mogg was the editor of the Times of London, and his son Jacob Rees-Mogg was the biggest proponent of hard Brexit.
Right.
They wrote a book called The Sovereign Individual, which is all about how individuals should not be under the thumb of the state, and that they should go to wherever they can get the best deal on taxes and not be taxed and all of this. And oh, by the way, the future is going to be using digital currency, what they called I guess like digital cash or something like that, cyber cash maybe.
Right.
This would be the basis of the future, and it would put the state governments out of the business of printing money and running banks. And so that book later had, in subsequent editions, the foreword was written by Peter Thiel.
Of course.
And it's basically a blueprint for a lot of what we're seeing now, and it was put out in 1997. So,
Dave, did you read the Dave Gruber's History of Money? Did you read that?
I have not. I'm aware of it, and it's on
tragic.
my list. Also, his new book. Even though he's dead, he just has released this new book with the other guy, Wigro or something,
right,
about the history of civilization and whatnot. But similar topics covered there, obviously.
Right. Yeah. What a loss.
So why is this magic internet money a danger to democracy? What do you think?
Yeah. So it's a danger to democracy for the same reasons that the gold standard was a danger to democracy. Basically, the thesis of the gold standard and also with crypto is that central bankers and policymakers are evil, dumb, can't be trusted, trying to take your money, whatever it is, and so they should be denied the ability to make any decisions about monetary policy by way of creating a system that removes them from the equation.
Got it.
So essentially, the gold standard does that by way of, there's gold
Physical
out in the wild,
limitation.
and people,
yeah,
and it's just like they don't have any real purview over that to speak of.
Got it.
Roosevelt tried to do that, to some extent, and you can kind of be somewhat successful with that. But it's the same thing with the crypto world, and so the idea being that in governments in Nigeria or Myanmar or wherever you want to name, where there's Zimbabwe, there's been hyperinflation and, bad management and failed governments and all that kind of thing. These kinds of tools, including gold, can be useful in terms of sort of disempowering a corrupt state and empowering the individual. And you kind of look at that and go, well, it seems kind of true and probably useful. And then you kind of take and translate that same, equation over into the United States. And you say, well, in the United States, we actually have a pretty functioning democracy, or at least we try.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to think that that's our shared project, even though it's a little delusional, but it's what we think we're doing, right? And when you basically say, oh, well, we're going to impose this monetary system that really isn't under state control in any way, and is kind of acts like gold and is subject to all of the same boom and bust kind of properties that it has, not to mention all of the potential abuse by people conducting organized crime and money laundering and all that.
It was called mining for a reason, right? Like
right.
If you think about what it takes, what gold does, right? There's still gold to be found. It's just really fucking hard to find it, right? It becomes more and more expensive to find it the longer and longer it goes. Yep. Bitcoin is literally designed that same way, right? The first ones are relatively easy to find, and the longer and longer it goes, the harder and harder and more expensive it gets, exactly the same way. So it's this sort of artificial limiting factor to the total quantity, which creates
scarcity.
It's a scarcity problem,
which creates pressure in any environment, right? If you're trying to grow something, and you keep a single variable static, like everything else has to grow around it, and eventually, that's just literally a bubble that's going to pop.
I mean, it kind of can't not to some extent. And, people will say, well, the bubble will pop, but then it'll come back and it'll do this and that. And like, it's one of these things that's going to be a volatile back and forth kind of asset for a good while. But right now, what it's also doing is it's undermining, the control and say that, the state governments, the United States government has over its economy and over how stuff works. And it's also pulling people into a bunch of crazy unregulated pyramid schemes. I mean, to be really frank about it. I mean, I support the right of people to invest in alternative investments and lose money, that they want to risk. But at the same time, like, there's a lot of really vulnerable people that have been pulled into this because, they want to become financially secure. They maybe haven't been financially secure. They're borrowing money sometimes to get into this. I mean, if when this thing busts, there's going to be all kinds of people who are completely blown out by it, and just not just worth nothing, but worth negative amounts of money because of the leverage that they have on it.
Yeah, and there's a few things that I've noticed becoming more problematic. One, obviously, is the environmental cost of the mining, right, and the computational energy required, as well as the relative ease of manipulation of these markets, as we've seen with Dorsey and Musk, sort of at their whim, creating these false bubbles and runs on these various coins. But the environmental impact, I can't find the source that I trust one over the other. Some say that it's absolutely not that big of a deal. Some say it's going to increase the carbon emissions by X factor. And so it's really hard to find out, to find an authority to see exactly what the cost of this increased necessity for power just to be mining these digital currencies are.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, I like Charlie Munger's statement. I just pulled it up. He basically called Bitcoin disgusting and contrary to the interests of civilization. And he said, I don't welcome a currency that's so useful to kidnappers and extortionists. And he also criticized it for the extreme volatility and lack of regulation. He's Warren Buffett's, money guy. And to be the chosen currency of kidnappers and extortionists might play well in certain segments of society, but I think that does not bode well. But you gave a really great explainer, and I'd love to hear Jim and Hi-Fi's takeaway on this, like high concept, to break it down to people, so people who might not understand fiat currency can kind of get an idea of the danger.
Look, it's pretend money. It doesn't. The only value it has is whatever the value is that the bid and ask in the market of Bitcoin gives it, right? There's no inherent value to it at all, and it's, other than in, I guess, El Salvador, is that where they turned it
Yeah.
into the national currency?
A
There
national currency. I don't think it's the
a
only
right.
one, but yeah.
Yes, but in that case, I guess you could say it has value, although it's backed by the El Salvador government, which I'm not, you know what I mean?
I love
Like,
El Salvador. I've
and
been there, but if it's backed by the
sure,
government,
beautiful
it
place,
gets you.
but like not the most stable economy
Mm,
in the world that you'd want to base a
absolutely.
currency on, right?
Correct.
And so my concern about it is that it appears to be designed to be a scarce commodity, and basing an economy on that is folly. I think we've, at least a large growing economy, and frankly, it's just obviously being used by anarcho-capitalists like
Yes.
Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. And if you just go out onto Twitter and look around,
Yeah.
every single, like, there is a very tight overlap between a lot of the fascism that's going on out there in general and crypto. um the Christchurch shooter
Yeah.
made the reason why he was able to take a couple of years off before he went and killed 51 Muslims is because he made a bunch of money on BitConnect, which was a Bitcoin ripoff that somehow this guy managed to get money out of and then go get himself trained up on a killing spree. So
Let's
like
not forget.
there always seems to be that element when it comes to this
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that concerns me, and then I will shut up, is that Satoshi, which is the origin story theoretically of Bitcoin, is
Mm-hmm.
a LARP. It is
Mm-hmm.
by definition a live action role play character. It could be one person, it could be any number of people, and I will just say it's Peter Thiel. So anyway,
Thank you, Jim.
carry on.
High five. Summary.
All right, so yeah, money laundering is huge. Let's not forget that Nicolas Fuentes, before the January 6th insurrection, got $500,000 from a French programmer who subsequently committed
You
suicide.
bet.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, environmental impact. One data point I do know is that when there was an outage at a Chinese coal mining energy plant, Bitcoin mining in China dropped by like 40%.
All right.
So that's a
Great.
valid data point.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Look, it's like oil, right? Like shale oil was not economical to drill for many years because the price of oil was too low. Over time, the price of oil got to the point where it became economical to go into Canada and do a whole bunch of, pressure shit that you have to do in the rock in order to get the oil out, right? It's the same with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's 60 grand. I remember literally on Facebook people try to push it at me at like 15 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, the higher it goes, and it will go higher before it blows, the more desperate people will get to get new Bitcoins, right? If a Bitcoin is 150 grand, like you'll blow a lot of power to get that, right?
Yeah, the
And so
resource
it's a
consumption.
progressive disease, as it were, which is, I
Yeah.
think, by design.
Well, that was super illuminating, and I think I finally understand it. And I hope that our viewers will get a really good sense of why it's important to pay attention to this. And please follow Dave Troy on Twitter, because he's going to
Damn right.
continually bring us this very important news, and he does a great job of making it as high concept as possible so people can try to grab onto something that really makes sense to them. We're already at the hour, but I feel like with Dave here, we should ask Dave what's on his mind from last week, or something that's really burning that you want people to know about as far as the disinformation wars go. And then I'd like to just have a quick discussion on the thread that we talked about, the NATO thread. So anything that's important to you that you want to make sure that you spit out to our viewers, that's very critical for them to know about at this moment.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, please, do check out, my Twitter account, Dave Troy, and then also I'm doing a weekly newsletter called Situation Report, where I'm just kind of summarizing some of the key stories
Right.
that I think are not being really recovered anywhere else. And you can find that at davetroy@medium.com. As far as, sort of the current situation, I'm concerned about December 3rd and the raising of the debt limit. Because if for whatever reason that isn't done, or there is a lot of drama around it, that's going to create uncertainty, which will help the sort of crypto cult. And I'd also like to reach out to people that are, I would, who consider themselves politically progressive, who are, interested in cryptocurrencies and in blockchain and stuff like that, and are perhaps dismayed that at the degree to which this whole thing is, sort of co-opted by right-wing fascists. I think that we need to start to spark kind of a schism in the cryptocurrency world between people who are, legitimately, progressive, and people who are, not on the far right and maybe signed up with Austrian economics. Because I think that there's a lot of well-intentioned, centrists, moderates, leftists who have been pulled into crypto land on the promise of technological innovation. And I think that's valid. And I think that there's some things that can be done there, but I think that there needs to be a clear adoption of a certain set of values. And I think we need to be recommitting ourselves to democratic governance principles and find ways to distance ourselves from folks on the right who are just basically aiming to do what the business plot people were doing in 1933. It's really not different, and we need to make it different. So I call on people to start to have those conversations.
And yeah, hell yeah. At some point, we'll be calling out the paid influencers too, who are being paid to be shills for this world, and they need to know exactly what they're supporting and why. So thank you for that. That was excellent. And Jim, can we just point people to your NATO thread, and can you give us some broad strokes about it? Because I think it's very important that we explain how disinformation is seeded and how we are essentially being directed to destroy ourselves from within.
Yeah, it's a concept that NATO called cognitive warfare, which I found to be very apt. It comes by many other terms as well. Michael Aquino and Paul Vallely, who were both at the time, I believe, colonels in the early 80s in Fort Bragg, wrote a paper called Mind War, which describes a basically sort of full spectrum disinformation campaign against a population. So it's wherever you can influence people, you do it. And the basic difference is that psyops have been around for a long time in war, but they've always been as a support function to kinetic war. They were never, until this concept came up, they were never an end into themselves. And the idea of mind war or cognitive warfare is that no, actually, you can completely change a population by inundating them with disinformation and applying a whole bunch of other psychological pressure. And after going through a whole bunch of them, having read a whole bunch of documents from Michael Aquino, Paul Vallely, going back, there is no doubt in my mind that that is what we're experiencing right now in some form or another. I don't claim to know exactly which version Flynn and others are pulling from. There's also a huge store of, obviously PSYOP information in Putin's
Yeah.
military intelligence,
Yeah.
and
that's
Putin is clearly connected here.
and one
Right.
So my the overall idea of cognitive warfare is you can take all of these kind of individual psyops, right? These individual things that you used to do to soften up a population or change an opinion here or there, and you
Yeah.
combine them all together so that you create conditions that either flip the country to being who you wanted them to be in the first place, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that was, or you basically create enough chaos in the country that it blows itself up, and then you can swoop in and do whatever you want. And
Right.
that,
Jim,
in my opinion,
one
is
of the
what
There you
Mike
go.
Flynn is doing.
and one of the more interesting things, Jim, that you brought up between the Russian psyops and the American psyops, particularly coming out of this cognitive warfare, is the rules of engagement, right, for war and for use and application of a cognitive warfare, right? The
Right.
Russia has an advantage in this area because they don't follow typically any rules of engagement for
At all.
wartime
They don't.
versus not wartime. So
Right.
there's a constant full frontal pressure of everything under the sun available to them in terms of psyops and cognitive warfare, which Americans would either not engage unless there's a federal an official declaration of war.
Mhm.
So
It's the
whereas the
advantage
Russians,
fascists always have, right? Because they
Yes.
are
right,
only concerned with power.
Right.
That is
that's right.
all they care about. And so if all you care about is power, the rules do not matter, much less fucking norms,
Right.
Well,
right?
there's no off
We are
switch.
too busy still worried about powdered wigs and norms and like
Yeah.
who gives a shit what political pressure you're going to get next year. There's not going to be a next year, you
Yeah.
idiot.
Yeah. So what I'm going to
Sorry.
do for our viewers
Exactly.
is one of my most popular threads is of a handbook of Russian information warfare, which really exposes how they do their thing. I'm going to combine that thread with your thread so people can get it all in one place. And Dave, before we lose you, final comment on what Jim just brought up.
Yeah, I mean, there's been this kind of ongoing program of psychological warfare against the American people. And, I think what people maybe don't fully understand is just kind of how it works. Basically, the whole process of it is to divide people into separate target audiences and then fling information payloads at them that will move them to take on certain behaviors. It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with what the content of the information is or what the beliefs are or whatever. It's all about how do you poke people and make them respond in a certain way. And, so you have to almost become divorced a little bit from like the meaning of the language and just look at how groups are manipulated. And we've become, I think we're not yet good at that at all. We're still caught up in like, they said this, they said that, and it's like, whatever, it's like, dude, what is this group of people that's agitated and why are they agitated and who did it? That's the kind of level of mechanics we need to understand.
Yeah.
Have you seen my whiteboard on cybernetics, Dave?
I don't
cybernetics,
think so.
Yeah. Cybernetics is basically it's a feedback loop. You get data, you process it. Okay, this is how I want to change it. This is what I'm going to do. All right, I did it. Let's see what happens. And that's what's being done to populations across America. And I would argue, actually, it's being done across the globe.
Worldwide.
Yes.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Global.
Well, and the thing that I've seen, guys, is most frightening is that these techniques have been perfected by the corporate sector for decades. I mean, the way that they're able to create a false sense of need or want from an individual.
That is true.
These
subliminal advertising goes back a long ass ways.
These
stuff works.
These methods have been perfected by PR companies, digital agencies working together, and then once this massive acquisition of data emerged, then it was game over, or it has been for a while.
Especially if you have
I would
Palantir.
just add that, yeah, no, for sure, Palantir is a big part of it, and I would add too that American exceptionalism, which kind of trains us to think that we're better than the rest of the world, and American individualism, which trains us to think that we are, individuals and that we're not subject to collective manipulation, has really blinded us to all of this that's going on, and so we're just little kids watching the magician who's doing the thing over here, but the hand is over here, and it's like we're just completely lost in terms of what's going on and really need to catch up. So,
well,
could I offer 2 quick books that people I think should check out if they really want to catch up quickly on what's going on and what's being done to the population, read about the Discordians and read Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy. I mean, that's the literature version of what's being done to the globe right now.
We'll go ahead and post all of that on our Twitter so everybody can find it there. And one thing I want to say before Dave leaves is that he gave me the most beautiful piece of information when I interviewed him for Byline. And that is, if you want to change someone's point of view, you need to change their friends. And I'm just putting that out there because it helped me so much in dealing with people in my family and in my life and seeing where they get their information and how they've been radicalized. It's not easy to change someone's friends, but hopefully that might help plant a seed as somebody's trying to grapple with going home for a holiday dinner and how are they going to deal with their radicalized family members. Dave, we love you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Love you guys.
Thanks, Dave. It's
And
great.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
So excited
Thanks.
to have Dave on our maiden voyage here. You're
Absolutely.
rad. He's so rad. So this is what is so exciting about this show.
I'm not Dave Troy. Get that, Dave? I don't deserve that. I don't deserve Dave's.
Dave tweets good at Dave Troy. So what I'm really excited about is that this show ends with an upbeat bang because Sean Connor, our brilliant visualist, offers a digital dissent. So let's bring Sean back to offer his digital dissent so we can have a nice way to end this episode, which was kick-ass, by the way.
So this was this is in honor of I guess we didn't get into it in too detail, but in honor of Mike Flynn being Q. So this was a song I did with taking Tim Heidegger edits from one of his podcasts and came up with this. I'll play probably about a minute and a half, and then I'll put a link up for the rest of it.
Thank you so much, Sean.
$147,005,381 HRC extradition already in motion effective yesterday with several countries in case of cross-border run. Passports approved to be flagged effective 10/30 at 12:01 a.m. Expect massive riots organized in defiance and others fleeing the U.S. to occur. Muslims will conduct the operation when activated. Proof check. Locate and never desk if activated for 2010/30 across most major cities.
About the deep state. Let's talk about the deep state. Let's talk about the deep state. Let's talk about the deep state.
Wow. Yeah. I'm all night at the Roxbury over here, and you guys are being so cool.
Yeah, I'll post a link for the rest of it. But basically, our character here has been radicalized as QAnon. He goes, to find out his friends aren't there for support, and promptly has to re-enter the digital world, only to find his psyche starting to fracture. He becomes multiple personalities, has difficulty, has no support. Ultimately, you have to watch the rest of it.
Got it.
John Connor, you're a genius, and we are honored to work with you.
Now I have to go watch it again because I was just
Yeah.
laughing because he was dancing real funny, and now
Yeah, sneak it in there. Get him dancing. Get him laughing and then sneak in the.
sneak in the heartbreaker, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I
Yeah,
see how this goes.
it
I
gets
guess we
I
can.
love the
dark.
inclusion of the feds because, well, we know. Yeah.
And then at the end of the video, watch to see who's orchestrated the whole thing there. Hi-fi.
Oh my gosh. Well, guys, we've already gone 16 minutes over. I expect that to be what happens every week because the show is already I'm inspired by your talents and what we've been able to do on our first episode here. And does anybody have any final thoughts, anything they want to impart to our viewers before we get on to the next episode?
Get off your ass. Do shit. Talk about shit. Do not be afraid of telling people, especially our leaders, to stop fucking around and fight this. The my main message that I keep trying to tell everyone, it's not going to stop on its own. It will not.
Yeah.
It is designed to never ever stop. It will not stop. And the only way we're going to do that is if we fight it. I don't mean physically. I mean, we need to have a plan to fight this cognitive war that they are waging on us.
Thank you for that, Jim.
Yep. There's no walking back down the stairs. Once you're on the second floor, I mean, it's not going to go away. The techniques, the tools, the technology is only going to get more powerful, stronger. They're going to get more data on more predictions on your behaviors. So it's a matter of creating a narrative, Jim, like we talked about, creating a story, and finding someone else who can share that story to basically map out the new narrative going forward.
Right on. Yeah. Hi-fi.
I'm just thinking about all the tactics that are used, and like I spend so much time whiteboarding out how this is done, and I don't know if people are really listening.
Well, maybe we can take some of your whiteboard tactics and reapply them toward the fight for preserving.
Hey, it's only our first episode, man. They're not.
All right. Well,
they're not listening yet, but we're gonna make them listen. You watch.
They're gonna.
Okay. Yeah. How do we explain a global fascist coup?
Well, we just started. We spent an hour starting.
Yeah.
It'll take us a few more.
I like to start with Elon Musk's tweet about "we'll coup who we want" because that's basically what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
if you look around the globe,
we're exposing them, so at least there is one place that people can go and go, all right, these guys are bringing us the truth, and I hope that's why we're calling it Truth Survives. We need truth to see sunlight to get through this. All I want to say is I'm from San Francisco. I was born in San Francisco in the 60s, and we march. So if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But in the meantime, we're going to bring the news as best we can. And I love all you guys, and just stay rad.
Back at you.